Welcome back to episode 15 of the Gray Files, where we peel back the layers of technology, economics, data science, and even the human condition itself, all in an effort to try and understand this vast and often perplexing world we live in. I'm your host, Erika Barker, and tonight we are beginning a 3-part series that touches every single person listening to this podcast right now. How your attention became the battlefield in a war you probably didn't know you were fighting. So tonight, we'll explore the mechanics of attention markets and information dynamics. And in the next episode, we'll take a deep dive into the dark psychology, brainwashing techniques, and manipulation tactics that turn ordinary citizens into ideological warriors. So right now, as you listen to these words, algorithms are making thousands of calculations about what information deserves space in your mind. Every scroll through your feed, every video recommendation, every news alert represents a victory in an invisible auction where your focus is the prize. And here's the unsettling part. The bidders in this auction aren't just selling you products anymore. They are selling you itself. Tonight, we're following two people who are fictionalized, but whose story illuminates how this attention economy transforms not just what we believe, but who we become. Charlie and Rachel are twins who once shared an inseparable bond, graduating high school in 2001, not just as siblings, but as best friends, without a political thought between them. 24 years later, they refuse to speak to each other. Charlie has become a passionate conservative, convinced that liberal institutions threaten everything he values. Rachel has evolved into an equally passionate liberal, certain that conservative movements represent an existential danger to democracy itself. Their transformation reveals how information warfare operates in the 21st century, not through force or obvious propaganda, but through the patient manipulation of what captures our daily attention. Part 1. The Architecture of Ancient Lies. Before we understand how Charlie and Rachel's world fractured, we need to travel back to when information was scarce and lies traveled slowly. In 44 BC, as Julius Caesar lay bleeding on the Senate floor, Octavian faced a problem familiar to any modern spin doctor. How do you control the narrative when your enemies control the megaphone? His solution was elegant. He turned Roman coins into tiny propaganda machines, stamping them with messages portraying Mark Antony as a foreign puppet controlled by Egyptian Queen Cleopatra. Every commercial transaction became political persuasion. It was brilliant, effective, and completely fabricated. But here's what made ancient disinformation different from today's. It was expensive, slow, and required massive institutional power. Minting coins demanded imperial resources. Distribution took months. Changing the message required melting down metal and starting over. Fast forward to 1835, New York, where the struggling newspaper The Sun published The Great Moon Hoax. This story had detailed accounts of winged humanoids and unicorns discovered on the lunar surface through powerful telescopes. And of course, that was pure fiction by desperate journalist Richard Adams Locke. But it worked incredibly well. Circulation skyrocketed, making The Sun temporarily the world's most read newspaper. The hoax established a template, echoing through media history. Sensational falsehoods could be more profitable than mundane truths. The printing press that had promised to democratize knowledge had also democratized deception. By World War II, disinformation had industrialized. Both Allied and Axis powers discovered radio could bypass traditional gatekeepers, reaching civilian populations directly across national borders. For the first time in human history, information warfare could be conducted at the speed of sound. The Cold War elevated disinformation to an art form. The Soviet Union's Dezinformatsiya program became a formal intelligence discipline. Their most successful operation involved planting the story that HIV was created by American military laboratories. This lie actually originated in an obscure 1983 Indian newspaper article, but Soviet intelligence amplified it globally. By the late 1980s, significant populations in Africa, Asia, and Europe believed this fabrication, rejecting Western medical aid while the virus killed millions. The HIV conspiracy succeeded because it exploited existing grievances about American imperialism and medical racism. It didn't require evidence, it required resentment. This is the key insight that would prove crucial in the digital age. Effective disinformation doesn't create new emotions. It amplifies existing ones. Part 2. When information became currency. In the early 1990s, Stanford economist Herbert Simon warned about something paradoxical. A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. In a world drowning in data, the limiting factor wouldn't be access to information, it would be human capacity to process it. Simon's insight proved prophetic. As the internet democratized, publishing and social media turned every user into a broadcaster. Millions of voices suddenly competed for the same scarce resource: your conscious attention. This scarcity created a market with its own economics, strategies for success, and forms of corruption. The first entrepreneurs to crack the attention economy weren't tech giants. They were teenagers. Now, before the 2016 election, Macedonian teenagers in the small town of Veles created over 100 pro-Trump websites filled with fabricated stories. They didn't care about American politics. They cared about American advertising dollars. A single viral fake news article earned thousands of dollars through automated ad networks, more than their parents made in months. This revealed the fundamental perverse incentive. Platforms, advertisers, and content creators all profit when attention is captured and held, regardless of whether that capture happens through truth or lies, insight or outrage. The technology enabling this was elegant and simple. Recommendation algorithms. These systems analyze massive user behavior data to predict what will maintain engagement. They learned that certain content types reliably capture attention. content confirming existing beliefs, triggering strong emotions, or making people feel part of important struggles. The algorithms don't understand truth or falsehood. They only understand engagement, and skillfully crafted lies often engage us more powerfully than truths. Part 3. The Graduates: A World Before the Split. So let's go back to Charlie and Rachel Patterson, our twins who graduated from West Liberty High School in 2001. They are both classic Midwest kids, raised on cornfields and country fairs, church on Sundays, tight family bonds that rural communities still fostered. Their father worked maintenance at the grain elevator. Their mother taught third grade. Politics barely registered. Democrats and Republicans were just names on distant ballots, as relevant as weather in Bangladesh. They were best friends in that way only twins can be. Inside jokes, mutual protection against bullies, futures planned around staying connected despite different paths. Charlie would study agriculture at Iowa State, eventually taking over a cousin's farm. Rachel would pursue journalism at the University of Iowa, dreaming of writing stories that mattered. In 2001, they inhabited the same information environment, same evening news with parents, same local newspaper, same radio stations. Their political opinions, such as they were, developed from shared experiences and common sources. This would be the last generation to experience information unity. Within a decade, Charlie and Rachel would live in completely different realities, consuming incompatible facts, viewing each other as fundamentally different kinds of people. Part 4. The algorithm learns what Charlie wants to hear. By 2010, Charlie's agriculture dreams were colliding with economic reality. The family farm barely stayed profitable. Commodity prices swung based on global markets he couldn't control. Environmental regulations meant compliance cost eating into thin margins. Healthcare premiums consumed a quarter of his income. 14-hour days just to service operational debt. Like millions facing economic pressure, Charlie searched for explanations. Why was farming harder than it ever was before? Who was responsible for forces squeezing him from every single direction? The answer arrived through Facebook. Charlie had joined to stay connected with high school friends and share farm pictures with relatives. But the platform's algorithms quickly learned something Charlie didn't know about himself. Content that made him angry kept him scrolling longer. A shared article about EPA regulations hurting family farms caught his attention. Charlie clicked, read, and shared. The algorithm noted this engagement and served similar content. Bureaucrats who never farmed dictating rules to generational farmers. Environmental extremists destroying rural communities to protect spotted owls. Each click taught the algorithm Charlie's preferences. Each share expanded his digital footprint. Each comment deepened engagement scores, prompting more content generating similar reactions. But the algorithm wasn't just learning Charlie's existing preferences, it was shaping them into new ones. Constant streams about regulatory overreach gradually expanded to broader government critique. EPA bureaucrats morphed into deep state conspiracies. Agriculture policy frustration became political corruption anger. The transformation was so gradual, Charlie just never noticed. He wasn't consciously choosing extremism, he was just engaging with content appearing relevant to daily struggles, unaware that artificial intelligence guided curation based not on truth or helpfulness, but on sustained clicking. By 2012, Charlie's feed had become curated outrage. Liberal professors indoctrinating students, mainstream media bias, politicians saying different things in public versus leaked audio, Washington corruption investigations, warnings about policies destroying small-town America. So instead of problems resulting from complex global economic forces and demographic shifts, there were clear villains and simple solutions. The struggle wasn't against impersonal market dynamics, but identifiable enemies who could be defeated. Charlie did not realize this same targeting was happening to millions of other economically stressed rural Americans. The algorithm had learned that financially pressured rural users responded strongly to content portraying them as victims of urban liberal elites. So it delivered that content at scale, creating manufactured consensus, or the illusion that millions had independently reached identical conclusions when they all received identical algorithmic programming. Part 5. The Mirror Effect. Rachel's Urban Programming. While Charlie's algorithms fed him stories about liberal conspiracies, Rachel's constructed an entirely different reality in her Chicago apartment. Rachel's journalism career had started promisingly in Cedar Rapids, but by 2010, she was a struggling Chicago freelancer watching the media industry collapse. Newsrooms cutting staff, advertising revenue fleeing to Google and Facebook, professional journalism's future looking grim. Like Charlie, Rachel sought explanations for economic frustration. Now, unlike Charlie, her algorithmic diet provided different villains and solutions. Her feeds began featuring content about corporate media consolidation, right-wing billionaires buying local newspapers and distorting coverage, fossil fuel companies suppressing climate science for decades, voter suppression in rural states gerrymandering diminishing urban political power. The algorithm learned Rachel engaged strongly with content about systemic injustice, corporate malfeasance, and threats to democracy. So it served more. Dark money investigations, conservative think tanks manufacturing fake grassroots movements, right-wing media deliberately spreading disinformation to manipulate vulnerable populations. Each piece felt like revelation. Rachel wasn't just learning about political corruption. She was discovering hidden architectures explaining why her career struggled, why her generation faced economic headwinds, why progress seemed difficult despite obvious solutions to obvious problems. The psychological satisfaction was identical to Charlie's experience, but with opposite political valence. Her problems weren't impersonal economic forces. They were deliberate conservative conspiracy to undermine democracy, journalism, and social progress. Now, by 2014, Rachel's information diet had evolved beyond her younger self's recognition. Twitter feeds streaming constant Republican obstruction outrage, voter suppression warnings, corporate government capture, Facebook showing endless environmental destruction articles, conservative dark money revelations, right-wing media manipulation examples. Now, like Charlie, Rachel believed she was staying informed about relevant issues. She didn't realize algorithmic intelligence selected her information based not on importance or accuracy, but on ability to generate emotional engagement, keeping her returning to those platforms. Both of them had become informational addicts, people whose daily emotional regulation depended on regular fixes of worldview confirming content, providing targets for frustration. Part 6. The Breaking Point. By 2016, Charlie and Rachel inhabited information universes so distinct they lived on different planets. Their first major political argument happened during Christmas dinner when Rachel mentioned voter suppression efforts. Charlie responded with voter fraud investigations. Neither was lying about feed content, but their sources described completely different realities. Rachel's algorithm showed extensively documented polling place closures, voter roll purges, registration restrictions disproportionately affecting urban and minority communities. Sources included academic studies, legal challenges, and credible investigative reporting. Now, Charlie's algorithms fed equally extensive documentation of non-citizen voting, ballot harvesting schemes, registration irregularities supposedly tipping elections toward Democrats. Sources included leaked videos, whistleblower testimonies, statistical analysis, all claiming to prove systemic fraud. Both had consumed hundreds of hours supporting their positions. Both could cite studies, quote experts, reference specific cases. Both genuinely believed they defended democracy against serious threats, but they operated from completely incompatible facts. The Christmas argument wasn't really about voting. It was deeper recognition that their sibling, their former best friend, who knew them better than anyone else, had apparently been deceived by propaganda so obvious only an idiot could not have seen through it. Their algorithmic environments had taught them how to think about people who believed differently. Charlie's feeds featured explanations for intelligent people falling for liberal propaganda, naive idealists manipulated by corrupt institutions, or privileged elites pursuing advantage through virtue signaling. Rachel's feeds provided detailed explanations for conservative beliefs. Rural Americans victimized by sophisticated disinformation turning them against economic interest, or beneficiaries of white supremacist systems defending privilege against demographic change. Both frameworks shared crucial characteristics. They made empathy impossible. Charlie couldn't understand Rachel's concerns as legitimate expressions of different values, only evidence she'd been deceived or corrupted. Rachel couldn't understand Charlie's concerns as genuine responses to real economic pressures, only proof he'd been radicalized by propaganda or motivated by prejudice. The attention economy had achieved something unprecedented. Technological systems capable of destroying empathy between people who loved each other by teaching them to interpret disagreement as evidence of moral and intellectual failure. Part 7. the machinery of mutual destruction. To understand their relationship's disintegration, we need to examine specific technological mechanisms creating divergent realities. Modern platforms employ collaborative filtering, which predicts preferences based on similar users' behavior. If people with similar demographics and online behaviors engaged with certain content, algorithms assume you'll find it engaging too. This creates something called homophily networks, or digital environments systematically exposing people to others who think like themselves. Charlie's rural, economically stressed profile matched millions engaging with anti-establishment conservative content. Algorithms surrounded him with their preferences, fears, enemies, and solutions. Rachel's urban, educated, economically precarious profile matched millions engaging with anti-establishment liberal content. Her algorithmic environment reflected their priorities, anxieties, villains, and remedies. The system went beyond preference matching, employing intermittent variable reinforcement, or the psychological mechanism making gambling addictive. Most content produces mild interest at best, and some occasionally trigger intense emotional response, like outrage, validation, fear, and hope. Users never know which content will deliver psychological reward, so they keep scrolling, clicking, checking for updates. Platform algorithms optimize for this addictive engagement pattern, learning to mix mundane content with increasingly intense material, maintaining what internal Facebook documents called meaningful social interactions, or interactions keeping users returning. Now, for Charlie, meaningful interactions meant discovering liberal corruption evidence, connecting with struggling farmers, participating in digital communities united by shared enemies. His feed became orchestrated rage, inducing sequences punctuated by validation and belonging moments. For Rachel, meaningful interactions meant uncovering conservative authoritarianism examples, networking with journalists and activists, engaging with communities defined by resistance to systemic oppression. Her experience was structurally identical to Charlie's, but with opposite political content. Both experienced something called pseudo-environment, or a mediated reality feeling more vivid than physical reality itself. Now, Walter Lippmann coined this term in 1922, describing newspaper influence on public opinion. But he couldn't imagine pseudo-environments updating real time based on algorithmic analysis of individual psychological vulnerabilities. Part 8. The Economics of Emotional Manipulation. The business model fueling Charlie and Rachel's divergent radicalization was brutally simple. Every click on government corruption articles, every share of voter suppression stories, every minute spent reading anger-inducing or fear-generating content generated revenue for platforms, publishers, and advertising networks connecting brands with engaged audiences. This created negative externalities, or social cost not reflected in market prices. Platforms captured economic value from engagement while externalizing social cost of political extremism. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube optimized algorithms maximizing time on site and user engagement. Their business models depended on keeping people like you and me scrolling, clicking, returning. The most effective emotional state was outrage combined with validation. Content making users angry about problems and hopeful about solutions, usually political ones. Content creators learned algorithmic preferences and optimized accordingly. Conservative media entrepreneurs built massive audiences producing content portraying liberal politicians as existential threats to American values. Liberal entrepreneurs built equally massive audiences portraying conservative politicians as threats to democratic institutions. Both were technically correct that the other side posed threats, but only because the same business model was radicalizing people in both directions simultaneously. Now, the advertising technology, monetizing this operated through real-time auctions, where brands bid for user attention access. Every web page load triggered algorithms analyzing browsing history, demographic profiles, current consumption to determine which advertisements would generate responses. Survival gear companies learned that social collapse content consumers would click emergency food supply ads. Financial services discovered economically anxious users would respond to protect your savings from government inflation appeals. Political book publishers sold massive quantities of titles confirming readers' existing beliefs about the other side's dangerous agenda. This created comprehensive economic ecosystems built around political polarization. The more extreme Charlie and Rachel became, the more valuable they were to advertisers selling products designed for polarized consumers. Their radicalization wasn't a side effect. It was a money-making profit opportunity. Part 9. When families become content. By 2020, Charlie and Rachel were not just consuming different information. They were participating in realities so complete that factual disagreement had become impossible. During COVID-19, their environments provided incompatible explanations for the same global crisis. Charlie's feeds emphasized government power grabs disguised as public health measures, pharmaceutical profits driving unnecessary restrictions, urban politicians imposing policies destroying small businesses without understanding rural communities. Rachel's feeds focused on anti-science extremism killing vulnerable populations. Conservative politicians prioritizing corporate interest over public health. Rural communities whose expertise distrust was being exploited by charlatans selling false cures. Both consumed coverage of identical events. Same press conferences, policy announcements, public health data, but algorithmic environments interpreted everything through established ideological frameworks designed to maximize engagement rather than understanding. Their final phone conversation happened in March of 2024, when their father had a heart attack. Even a family medical emergency became filtered through political polarization. Charlie's visitor restriction frustrations were interpreted by Rachel as anti-public health extremism, endangering vulnerable patients. Rachel's healthcare reform concerns were heard by Charlie as liberal talking points blaming individual crisis on systemic problems. The breaking point came when Charlie shared an article about pharmaceutical company profits driving unnecessary medical interventions. while Rachel shared content about medical misinformation spread by conservative influencers killing rural Americans through vaccine hesitancy. Both articles contained factual information, both addressed legitimate healthcare concerns, both had been crafted by political organizations seeking to channel medical anxieties toward broader ideological conclusions. Their father, recovering well from routine cardiac surgery, found himself listening to children arguing whether his heart attack was evidence of corporate medical exploitation or small-town America health ignorance. When he asked them to stop turning his emergency into political content, it triggered a final argument about whose beliefs had become so extreme they were inappropriate for family discussions. The twins have not spoken to each other since. Part 10: The Invisible War's Casualties. 3 years later, Charlie and Rachel represent the attention economy's most complete victory. Transformation of human beings into content generation engines, producing engagement for algorithmic systems while destroying their own social bonds. Charlie now runs a YouTube channel explaining how liberal institutions destroyed his relationship with his sister. Videos about how woke ideology breaks up families generate thousands of views and substantial advertising revenue. His personal trauma has become his brand. Now, Rachel runs a popular podcast about how conservative radicalization destroys family relationships. Episodes about losing loved ones to right-wing propaganda attract thousands of listeners and progressive organization sponsorships. Her family breakdown has become her professional identity. Both have monetized their mutual estrangement. Both built online communities around shared experiences of losing family members to political extremism. Both receive regular validation from strangers confirming their siblings were indeed lost to dangerous propaganda promoted by the other side. Neither has questioned whether their own political evolution contributed to the relationship's destruction. Both have been algorithmically trained to view self-criticism as weakness and mutual understanding as political betrayal. Part 11: Connecting Across Disciplines: The Science of Weaponized Attention. To understand how the attention economy steamrolled Charlie and Rachel, we need to look beyond one field of study. This was a perfect storm born from disconnected disciplines that didn't bother to talk to each other. That silence, well, it is exactly why the system won. So computer scientists were busy fine-tuning recommendation engines, optimizing for time on site like it was a video game. They didn't stop to consider how those same algorithms could hijack belief systems. Psychologists, meanwhile, understood how our brains are basically lazy processors riddled with biases, but they weren't in the rooms where code was being written. And political scientists? Well, they saw foreign influence campaigns coming a mile away, but completely missed how Silicon Valley's chase for ad dollars could cause the exact same political chaos, just made in America. The platforms, well, they were ahead of the game. They built interdisciplinary teams that pulled from psychology, behavioral economics, neuroscience, and network theory. Their mission wasn't noble. It was to keep you scrolling. While academia argued over jargon and siloed their findings into field-specific journals, tech was using that same research to feed the engagement machine. Cognitive psychology gave them the cheat codes. Confirmation bias? Perfect for keeping you in your bubble. Availability heuristic? Great. Just show the same talking point a dozen times until it feels like gospel. Anchoring bias? Use the first outrageous thing someone sees to frame every future thought. Behavioral economics added the glue. People hate losing more than they love winning, so feed them fear. Social proof? Show them everyone else believes it, even if that everyone is a bot farm. Hyperbolic discounting? Tap into their now obsessed brains so they click before thinking. Neuroscience took it to the next level. Our political beliefs light up brain regions tied to personal identity. Challenge someone's politics, and it doesn't register as a debate. It feels like a punch in the gut. The response isn't logic, it's loyalty. Social rejection circuitry lights up, and just like that, facts don't stand a chance. In network theory, it explained how a loud minority could hijack the stage. Algorithms amplify the extremes because they get clicks. So even if most users are moderate, their views vanish in the noise. What's left is a carnival mirror that makes the fringe look like the mainstream. Part 12. Looking ahead, the future of attention warfare. As artificial intelligence gets smarter, attention manipulation is weaponizing in real time. AI can now craft custom disinformation like it is tailoring a suit. It pulls from your browsing habits, your moods, your late night doom scrolling. Want to shake someone's worldview? Feed them a story calibrated to trigger their exact fears. In 5 years, it won't just be text. It will be video, voice, maybe even holograms. Deepfakes are already good enough to fool your brain. Next, they'll fool your heart. So imagine Charlie stumbling onto a video of Rachel saying something incendiary that she never actually said. And Rachel? She gets her own video of Charlie sounding like a monster. These aren't just plausible, they are inevitable. Add in virtual and augmented reality, and now we're talking fully immersive echo chambers. So forget scrolling through divisive memes. You'll live inside of them. But here's the real thing to think about. The same tech that can exploit attention can also defend it. AI could flag manipulative content. Educational tools could teach kids how to spot a psychological ploy before they fall for it. Regulations might finally start punishing platforms that knowingly profit from social disintegration. So it's not a question of if the tactics get more advanced, because they will. The real question is whether democracies can build firewalls before everything else burns to the ground. Can we create cognitive immunity fast enough to protect the kind of nuanced thinking that democracy actually requires? Part 13. The war you did not know you were fighting. Here's the big punch in the gut. You might be Charlie. You might be Rachel. Hell, you might be both. Everyone listening has been exposed to that exact same psychological warfare. You've been micro-targeted. You've been nudged, poked, manipulated, Not because you're weak or uninformed, but because you're a human. The attention economy doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're left or right, PhD or high school dropout. If you got a pulse and a phone, you're in the crosshairs. Charlie and Rachel's downfall wasn't having opinions, it was losing their capacity to love someone with different ones. The attention economy taught them that political disagreement was a moral failure, not a sign of independent thought. And that's the scary part. It all felt normal. They didn't just wake up and say, "I'm going to become radicalized today." They clicked on a few things, watched a few videos, joined a few groups. They made reasonable decisions in an unreasonable environment. They were outmatched by systems that understand human behavior better than we do. Systems that operate faster than our ability to reflect. Systems that sell outrage and reward division. But now you know. You know this war exists. You know the tactics. You know the weapons. So next time in the Gray Files in episode 16, we'll dissect the playbook of politicians and media outlets turning neighbors into enemies and outrage into currency. But for now, remember this. Charlie's somewhere filming another angry video. Rachel's recording another heartfelt podcast about how her family fell apart. They're both telling the truth. They're both dead wrong, and they're both stuck in a machine that profits from their pain. The attention war isn't coming. It's already here. The only real choice left is what kind of soldier you're going to be.